The sound of clattering dishes echoed through the kitchen as I scrubbed another plate, my hands aching from hours of repetitive motion. The soap suds slid between my fingers, leaving my skin raw and red. The kitchen was hot, steamy, and unforgiving. But it was my reality, the world I had known for the past year since tragedy struck. My name is Goldie, and this is my life. It wasn't always like this. I once had dreams, plans for the future that felt bright and limitless. But those dreams crumbled the day my husband, Michael, died. He was my everything, the love of my life, the father of our twin boys, Danny and Liam. And then, in a blink, he was gone, leaving me alone to navigate a world that suddenly felt dark and treacherous. When Michael died, I had to leave behind the life I knew and find work, any work, to keep a roof over our heads. That's how I ended up at the Silver Spoon, a restaurant that catered to the town's elite. The pay was barely enough to cover the rent, let alone put food on the table. Every night, I came home too exhausted to cook, and I'd often just throw together something simple, rice, maybe, or a can of soup. I tried to hide my struggles from the boys, but they weren't stupid. They knew things weren't right. Then one night, as I was taking out the garbage, I noticed something. Plates of leftover food, untouched by the customers, were piled in the corner of the kitchen, ready to be thrown out. I hesitated, my stomach growling, and then something inside me snapped. My pride was already in pieces, I had nothing left to lose. I took the leftovers. It became a routine, a secret I kept even from my children. I didn't want them to know their mother was so desperate that she was taking food meant for the trash. But those leftovers meant the difference between going to bed hungry or full. It wasn't just food, it was hope. A small, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, we could get through this. But secrets have a way of unraveling, especially in a place like the Silver Spoon. The day began like any other, cold, gray, and full of dread. I had just clocked in when the whispers started. The Silver Spoon had a new owner, someone named Alex Carver. No one knew much about him, only that he was young, ambitious, and had big plans for the restaurant. To be honest, I didn't care. Owners came and went, my job remained the same. Or so I thought. I was rinsing off a particularly stubborn pan when I felt a strange sensation, like someone was watching me. I glanced up, and my heart nearly stopped. Standing in the doorway, arms crossed and expression unreadable, was a man I didn't recognize. Tall, with sharp features softened only by a hint of stubble, he had an air of authority that sent a chill down my spine. "Goldie, right?" His voice was calm, but there was something in his eyes that made me uneasy. "Yes, sir," I replied, keeping my tone respectful, though my nerves were screaming at me to run. "I'm Alex Carver, the new owner. Could I have a word with you in my office?" My stomach dropped. This was it, the moment my secret would be exposed. I nodded, wiped my hands on my apron, and followed him through the bustling kitchen to the back of the restaurant. His office was sparse, just a desk and a few chairs, but it was clean and organized, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. "Have a seat," Alex said, gesturing to the chair opposite his desk. I sat, my heart pounding in my chest. "I'll get straight to the point," he began, leaning forward slightly. "I've been reviewing the security footage from the past few weeks, and I noticed something interesting." My mouth went dry. I didn't know what to say, so I stayed silent, waiting for the axe to fall. "You've been taking leftovers," Alex continued, his gaze never leaving mine. "Food that was meant to be thrown out." I swallowed hard. I'm sorry, Mr. Carver. I didn't mean to steal, I couldn't let it go to waste. My boys. They're hungry, and I'm not here to fire you, Goldie." His words were like a slap, bringing me to a halt. I stared at him, confused. "You're not?" "No," he sighed, rubbing his temples. "I'm here because I need to understand why you felt you had no other choice." And so, I told him. I told him about Michael, about the twins, about the daily struggle just to keep going. I didn't expect sympathy, and I definitely didn't expect what came next. "Goldie, I'm going to help you." I blinked, not sure I heard him correctly. "Help me?" "Yes." His expression softened, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes that wasn't cold or calculating. It was empathy. I can't stand by and watch someone suffer when I can do something about it. "So, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to increase your salary, enough so you won't have to take leftovers anymore. And if there's anything else you need, anything at all, you come to me. Understand?" I was too stunned to speak. This man, this stranger, was offering me a lifeline when I had been expecting a noose. All I could do was nod, tears brimming in my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered, the words barely audible. Alex smiled, a small, sad smile. "Don't thank me yet. There's a lot more I need to fix around here, starting with the thefts. But that's my problem, not yours." He stood, signaling the end of our conversation. "You're free to go. And Goldie, keep your chin up. Things are going to get better." I left his office in a daze, my mind spinning. For the first time in what felt like forever, I dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, things were finally starting to change. The next few weeks passed in a blur. True to his word, Alex had increased my pay, and for the first time, I could afford to buy fresh groceries and clothes for the boys. Life still wasn't easy, but it was bearable. I was even beginning to think of Alex as more than just my boss. He was kind, thoughtful, and despite his serious demeanor, he had a way of making me feel safe. I found myself looking forward to our brief conversations, the way his eyes would light up when he talked about his plans for the restaurant. But there was something else, something lurking in the background that I couldn't quite put my finger on. It started with small things, ingredients going missing, expensive bottles of wine unaccounted for, a general sense of unease among the staff. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but then Alex started spending more time in the kitchen, watching, observing. His demeanor changed, too. He became more guarded, his smiles rarer. One evening, as I was finishing up the last of the dishes, I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. It was Carl, the head chef, talking in hushed tones with one of the waiters. They didn't see me standing just around the corner, out of sight but close enough to hear every word. "Can't keep this up, Carl," the waiter was saying, his voice tense. "If Alex finds out, we're done." "He won't find out," Carl replied, his tone dismissive. "He's too busy playing the hero with that dishwasher girl. Just keep your mouth shut and do as I say." My heart pounded in my chest. What were they talking about? What had Carl been doing behind Alex's back? I didn't have to wait long to find out. The very next day, Alex called an emergency staff meeting. We all gathered in the dining room, the atmosphere thick with tension. Alex stood at the front, his face a mask of controlled anger. "I've been reviewing the finances, and there's been a significant loss in inventory over the past few months," he began, his voice cold. "Someone has been stealing from the restaurant, and I'm not going to tolerate it any longer." There was a murmur of unease among the staff. Carl, standing near the back, remained impassive, his expression unreadable. "I've already identified the culprit," Alex continued, his eyes locking onto Carl's. "Carl, you've been skimming off the top, stealing ingredients, wine, anything you could get your hands on to pay off your debts." Carl's face paled, but he quickly recovered, his expression hardening. "You don't know what you're talking about, Alex. I've been loyal to this restaurant since day one." "Loyal?" Alex scoffed, stepping closer. "Loyalty doesn't involve stealing from your employer." "I have the proof, Carl. I suggest you come clean now before I take this to the authorities." There was a tense silence, everyone waiting to see what Carl would do. Finally, he sighed, the fight draining out of him. "You're right," Carl admitted, his voice bitter. "I've been stealing. But it wasn't just for me. I have debts, Alex. Debts that could get me killed if I don't pay them off." Alex's expression softened slightly, but his tone remained firm. "I understand desperation, Carl. but you put this entire restaurant at risk. You betrayed the trust of everyone here. Carl hung his head, shame washing over him. I know. I'm sorry. Alex was quiet for a moment, then he spoke, his voice measured. I'm not going to call the police, but you're done here, Carl. I'll help you get back on your feet, but you need to leave now. Carl nodded, defeated. He walked out of the restaurant without another word, and just like that, he was gone. The staff dispersed, the tension slowly easing, but I stayed behind. Alex was still standing there, staring at the door where Carl had just exited, a conflicted look on his face. I approached him cautiously. Alex? He turned to me, his expression softening when he saw me. Goldie. I'm sorry you had to witness that. It's not your fault, I said quietly. You did what you had to do. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I hate this part of the job. But it had to be done. I can't stand seeing people suffer, Goldie. Not you, not Carl. I wish there was a way to fix everything, but you can't save everyone, I finished for him. He nodded, looking weary. Yeah. I guess not. For a moment, we just stood there in silence, the weight of everything hanging between us. And then, something shifted. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I felt a spark, a connection that went beyond words. Goldie, he began, his voice soft, I don't want you to think of me as just your boss. I care about you, about your boys. I want to help you, not just with money, but with everything. If you'll let me. My heart skipped a beat. There was something in his eyes, something genuine and warm, that made me believe he truly meant it. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to hope. I'd like that, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. Alex smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. Good. Because I think we're both in need of a little saving. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions I hadn't felt in years. Alex and I grew closer, our conversations extending beyond the walls of the Silver Spoon. He began joining me during breaks, sharing stories of his past, his dreams, and his vision for the restaurant. I found myself opening up to him in ways I hadn't with anyone since Michael. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the town, Alex invited me for a walk. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of autumn leaves. We strolled down the cobblestone streets, the silence between us comfortable and filled with unspoken words. Goldie, he began, stopping near a park bench. There's something I want to ask you. I turned to him, curiosity piqued. His eyes held a vulnerability I'd never seen before. Would you and the boys like to join me for dinner tomorrow? Not at the restaurant, but at my home. I was taken aback. The invitation felt intimate, a significant step forward. My heart raced, torn between excitement and apprehension. I don't know, Alex. The boys can be a handful, and I wouldn't want to impose. He chuckled softly. Nonsense. I'd love to meet them properly. Besides, I make a mean spaghetti bolognese. I laughed, the sound feeling foreign yet delightful. Well, in that case, we'd be honored. The next evening, I found myself nervously standing outside Alex's home, the boys clutching my hands. His house was modest yet welcoming, with a well-kept garden and warm lights glowing from within. Alex opened the door, his face lighting up at the sight of us. Welcome. Come in, make yourselves at home. Danny and Liam, ever the curious duo, immediately began exploring, their eyes wide with wonder. Alex took it in stride, engaging them in playful banter and showing them around. I watched, heart swelling, as he effortlessly connected with them. It was as if a missing piece had fallen into place. Dinner was a joyous affair. The boys devoured the spaghetti, proclaiming it the best they'd ever had. Alex laughed, sharing stories from his childhood, making the boys giggle with his antics. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of normalcy, of family. After dinner, as the boys played in the living room, Alex and I retreated to the kitchen to clean up. The atmosphere was warm, charged with unspoken emotions. "Thank you for this," I whispered, handing him a dish to dry. "It's been a long time since we've had a night like this." He paused, looking at me with an intensity that made my breath hitch. "Goldie, you and the boys deserve happiness. I want to be a part of that, if you'll let me." Tears prickled at the corners of my eyes. The sincerity in his voice, the genuine care, it was overwhelming. "I'd like that," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. He smiled, reaching out to tuck a stray strand of hair behind my ear. The touch was gentle, intimate. My heart fluttered, the barriers I'd built around it crumbling. But as the night wore on, shadows from the past began to creep in. After we returned home and the boys were tucked into bed, I sat alone, memories of Michael flooding back. Guilt gnawed at me. Was it too soon? Was I betraying his memory by allowing myself to feel again? Sleep eluded me, the internal battle raging. I knew Michael would want me to be happy, to find love again. But moving forward felt like letting go, and that terrified me. The next day at work, I was quiet, lost in thought. Alex noticed, his brow furrowing with concern. "Is everything okay?" he asked during our break. I hesitated, then nodded. "Just thinking." He reached out, his hand covering mine. "Goldie, you can talk to me." I met his gaze, the weight of my emotions threatening to spill over. I feel guilty. For moving on. For feeling this way about you." Understanding dawned in his eyes. He squeezed my hand gently. "I can't imagine what you've been through. But know this, it's okay to cherish the past and still look forward to the future. Michael will always be a part of you, of the boys. Nothing can change that." Tears welled up, and I blinked them away. "Thank you, Alex." He smiled softly. "Anytime." As days turned into weeks, our relationship deepened. The boys adored him, often asking when they'd see Uncle Alex again. Life was beginning to piece itself back together. But just when I thought happiness was within reach, life threw another curveball. One afternoon, as I was preparing to leave for work, there was a knock at the door. Puzzled, I opened it to find a woman standing there. She was stunning, with raven black hair, piercing blue eyes, and an air of elegance. She looked at me with a mix of curiosity and disdain. "Can I help you?" I asked, uncertainty creeping in. She smirked, her red lips curving in a way that sent chills down my spine. "I'm here to see Alex." "Is he around?" I frowned. "He's at the restaurant." "And you are?" She extended a manicured hand. "Victoria. Alex's wife." My world tilted. Wife? But Alex had never mentioned being married. A sense of dread settled in my stomach. "I'm sorry, but I wasn't aware." She cut me off, her eyes narrowing. "Clearly. Tell him I'll be waiting." With that, she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving me standing there, heart pounding. Who was Victoria? And why hadn't Alex mentioned her? The revelation of Victoria's existence weighed heavily on me as I made my way to the Silver Spoon. Questions swirled in my mind, each more troubling than the last. Had Alex been hiding her from me? Were his feelings genuine, or was I just a fleeting distraction? As I entered the restaurant, I spotted Alex engrossed in conversation with a supplier. I waited patiently, the knot in my stomach tightening with each passing second. Once he was free, I approached. "Alex, we need to talk." He sensed the urgency in my tone, his brow furrowing. "Of course. Let's go to my office." Once inside, I closed the door behind me, leaning against it for support. "Victoria came to my house today," I blurted out. Shock registered on his face, followed by a mix of anger and frustration. "What? Why would she?" "That's what I'd like to know," I interrupted, my voice trembling. "She said she's your wife." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Ex-wife, actually. We divorced over a year ago. I thought I'd seen the last of her." "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, hurt evident in my voice. He looked at me, remorse filling his eyes. "I was going to, I swear. But every time I tried, the moment never felt right. Our marriage ended badly, and I didn't want her shadow looming over what we have. I took a deep breath, trying to process his words. What does she want? He shook his head, anger flashing in his eyes. Knowing Victoria, probably money. She always had a knack for showing up when it benefited her. She said she'd be waiting for you. He scoffed. Of course she did. Silence hung between us, thick and suffocating. Finally, he approached me, his gaze softening. Goldie, I'm sorry. I should have told you about her. I never wanted secrets between us. I looked into his eyes, searching for deceit but finding none. Despite the turmoil, I believed him. Just. No more secrets, I whispered. He nodded, pulling me into a comforting embrace. I promise. Later that evening, Alex left to confront Victoria. I waited anxiously, my mind racing with possibilities. Hours passed, and just as worry began to consume me, the doorbell rang. Opening it, I found Alex, exhaustion etched on his face. Can I come in? He asked softly. I stepped aside, allowing him entry. Once inside, he sank onto the couch, running a hand over his face. Victoria's in trouble, he began. She's accrued massive debts and is being threatened by some dangerous people. She came to me for help. I sat beside him, processing his words. What are you going to do? He sighed. As much as I despise her for what she did, I can't ignore her plea. I agreed to help settle her debts on the condition that she leaves and never contacts me again. I nodded, understanding the weight of his decision. You're a good man, Alex. He looked at me, vulnerability shining in his eyes. I just want to move forward, with you. I smiled softly, taking his hand. Then let's do that. Days turned into weeks, and life began to stabilize once more. Victoria had taken the money and disappeared, hopefully for good. The restaurant flourished under Alex's guidance, and he even promoted me to assistant manager, a role I never imagined for myself. But life had one more surprise in store. One evening, as I was closing up, a familiar figure appeared at the doorway. It was Carl, the former chef. His appearance was disheveled, eyes hollow. Goldie, he croaked, desperation lacing his voice. Carl? What are you doing here? I asked, concern rising. I need help, he pleaded. I tried to fix things, but it's all spiraled out of control. I hesitated, torn between caution and compassion. Wait here. I'll get Alex. Minutes later, Alex joined us, his expression wary. Carl, he greeted curtly. What's going on? Carl swallowed hard, tears brimming. I tried to pay off my debts, but the people I owe. They're relentless. They're threatening my family. I didn't know where else to turn. Alex's jaw tightened. I helped you once, Carl. You promised to get clean. I know, Carl whispered, shame evident. I failed. Silence enveloped us, the weight of Carl's confession pressing down. Finally, Alex spoke, his voice firm. I'll help you, but this is the last time. You need to take responsibility and get your life together. Carl nodded fervently. I will. Thank you. Over the next few days, Alex worked tirelessly to settle Carl's affairs, ensuring his safety. He even arranged for Carl to enter a rehabilitation program, giving him a chance at redemption. Through it all, I stood by Alex's side, marveling at his unwavering compassion. It was one of the many reasons I had fallen for him. As we navigated the challenges life threw our way, our bond strengthened, rooted in trust, understanding, and love. One evening, as we stood on the balcony of Alex's home, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and crimson, he turned to me, eyes shining. Goldie, meeting you has been the best thing that's ever happened to me. You and the boys have brought joy back into my life. I can't imagine a future without you. Tears welled up as he dropped to one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. Will you marry me? Emotion choked me, words failing. Instead, I nodded, A radiant smile breaking through as tears streamed down my cheeks. Yes, I whispered. 1,000 times, yes. He slipped the ring onto my finger, rising to envelop me in a loving embrace. In that moment, surrounded by the beauty of the setting sun and the promise of a new beginning, I knew that despite the hardships, life had led me to where I was meant to be. With Alex by my side, I was ready to embrace the future, come what may. If you like this story, please subscribe, like, click the bell, and leave a comment. Thank you in advance.